Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to a more awesome web. Features you've always wanted. My name is Eric Bidelman. I'm a developer programs engineer on the Google Chrome team. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff today. Way too many features to really cover in depth, but you can follow me on Google+, you can follow me on Twitter, or check out some of the articles I've written on HTML5 Rocks, which will discuss some of these technologies and APIs more in depth. So Planning got more awesome. I stood on stage last year and sort of gave a rundown of really cool features. And there's a ton of stuff that have come since last year, in the last 6 months, even in the last 3 months. Web components is now a thing. There's a lot of stuff landing under this umbrella in the browser. You saw some at the keynote. There's a couple sessions on this tomorrow, including one that I'm giving. Really exciting, awesome technologies under that umbrella. WebRTC, now on mobile, now everywhere. Data Channel API for doing binary streaming peer-to-peer is a thing now. Web Audio API is getting awesome adoption across the various browser vendors. So Chrome, Firefox has this enabled in their nightlies. Safari and iOS on mobile, you can do real-time processing. We'll see demos of this later on in the browser in JavaScript. Request autocomplete, standardizing payments on the web is a session, I believe, tomorrow or today on this. Just amazing stuff. And the list goes on and on and on. There's APIs just for about everything now. But I want to focus on two sort of primary topic areas, and that is CSS and multimedia. I think these are the two biggest areas where we're seeing the most sort of changes and most awesome stuff land in CSS and multimedia. So just a little convention on this slide deck. You're going to see icons for everything here. You're going to see specification links. There's actually only one thing today that I'm talking about that doesn't have a spec for it. HTML5 Rocks article, if there's more content on that subject, you can come back later in the slide deck. Old way, sort of the red, old busted way, this is a technique we've made, have learned how to do in the past, and there's probably a better way to do it. Maybe a CSS feature has landed that we don't need JavaScript for anymore, and so that's what the new hotness, the orange means. No JavaScript, the purple, basically means, again, CSS stuff is starting to take full circle, and we don't necessarily need JavaScript to do the things we used to need to do. We can offload that stuff to CSS at the presentational layer where it should be. And then that sort of leads to this last bling, the bling of the hash perf matters tag. This is going to be a performance tip that you can take advantage of. All right, so without further ado, let's dive right into CSS. If you take away anything from this talk, it's basically that you don't necessarily need JavaScript for everything. And that's really because performance matters. You saw the talk before me talk about jank busting. The more we can offload from JavaScript, not have to set up scroll handlers, all this stuff, the more the browser can optimize. And one great example of this is new viewport units in CSS. So this is really great. We have VW, Vmin, Vmax, and Vmin. So these are the viewport percentage units. So viewport width, viewport height, viewport min, and max. And unlike rems or EMs, which are based solely on the parent container, right? These are relative to the parent. Viewport percentage units are great because they're based solely on the viewport. So in this sort of multi-device responsive design world, it's really handy to be able to size things according to what viewport I'm talking to and my app is being displayed on. So one of these guys is equal to 1% of the width or height, depending on which unit you're talking about. So 1 VW is 1% of the viewport width, 1 VH is 1% of the height, and in the case of Vmin or Vmax, you're talking about the minimum dimension. So this slide deck, for instance, is about 1,000 by 700 pixels. So my min would be the height in this case. So 1 Vmin would equal 1 VH in the case of this viewport that I have here. So this is cool, too, because we can size things based on the viewport, solely on the viewport, and we don't need to set up crazy amount of media query breakpoints to size things like fonts. We can just take advantage of these units and use them right out of the box. So ultimately what this means is you have a couple of performance gains here. You don't have to do things like determine the viewport size. If you're just sizing fonts or sizing divs or something, you can use these units. And you don't need to use JavaScript to determine that viewport size anymore. And similarly, you don't need to set up resize handlers. People tend to do way too much stuff in resize handlers. They manipulate the DOM. And that basically just says, OK, browser, you can't optimize scrolling or anything of that nature. So a quick example of this is something like this. I have a 1,000 by 700 pixel viewport, and I want to set an H1 to be 4 VW, its font size. So what that roughly calculates out to be is 4 times 1,000, so viewport width, times that 1%. So in this case, my H1 is going to be calculated out to be about 40 pixels when it's displayed on screen. Similarly, I can set a div to be a width of 15 vmin, which means 15 times the minimum dimension, so in this case it's the height, 700 pixels, times that 1%. So this div's width would be roughly 105 pixels. Quick example of this. So this is my current viewport. It's about 1500 by 1984 on this resolution. So one use case for viewport percentage units is things like font size. It's really, really great. Your fonts are always going to look good no matter what viewport you're on. Now, as I scale this thing down, you'll see that my fonts are being recalculated based solely on the viewport. So those hello worlds are always going to look great no matter what my viewport size is. And so they're always going to be scaled based solely on the viewport. So I don't have to set up things like media query breakpoints to define all these different breakpoints for my responsive design. So that's pretty handy. And support for this is actually really, really good. So this is sort of your current lay of the land as far as browser support. You have Safari, Firefox, Chrome. IE has this as well, which is really great. And mobile support is actually up and coming too. I'm including Opera Beta Mobile on here because, of course, they've moved to Chromium recently. So this is something you can take advantage of today. Really, really awesome, especially for responsive type designs. Something else we have is intrinsic sizing, and this is really one of my favorites, and a lot of people don't know about this. But if you combine intrinsic sizing, so there's these new values, and these are vendor prefixed, WebKit min or Moz min, content, fit content, max content, and fill available. And so you combine something like this with Flexbox, and it's just absolutely amazing. It boggles your mind. So I have display flex, this, of course, vendor prefixed for this AP or this property. I have my red container is a Flexbox container, and its content, the hello world, is being centered vertically and horizontally. Thank you, Flexbox, 3 lines of CSS. Really, really sweet. But then I can combine it with intrinsic sizing and do things like I can basically shrink wrap the width and height of this parent container down to that inner children content. So I don't have to use JavaScript to sort of get computed style of my inner children. I can just set fit content to both width and height and get that shrink wrap effect. I can also say fill available, so take up the entirety of your parent container. And so height 100% doesn't ever work out like we quite want it to, but fill available does the right thing each and every time. You can also say min content. So in this case, shrink wrap yourself to be contained inside of your children, but it's OK to wrap. So I have a text node, it's just hello world. That's going to wrap. I haven't specified for it not to. So really, really handy. You combine this with Flexbox. You don't have to do crazy things in JavaScript anymore. Support is in Firefox and a couple of the mobile browsers as well, and Chrome. So really, really handy. Again, height 100%. You don't need it anymore. You can use fill available. What about CSS variables? This is something that's sort of been on the horizon for a long, long time. People have wanted proper CSS variables to do variables in CSS. And we can finally enable this. This is an experimental feature in Chrome that you can enable in About Flags. And so preprocessors have made this really common, right? Less, Sass, Compass. You can set up variables globally, and then you can use them throughout your style sheets. Very, very handy. It's an obvious win for the web. And so we can do that now actually in CSS proper. And the way it works is that you define a variable name, and the only caveat is it has to be prefixed with this var dash. So again, vendor prefixes, var dash, variable name, whatever you want, uppercase, lowercase, camel case. So I'm defining a font color to be red. And then the way I use this variable is to use the var function. So var and then the CSS variable's name. What's really nice about this is that just as with CSS, right, things cascade down. That's an awesome property of CSS. Variables cascade down too. So this variable here, this font color, has been defined in my body element, my body selector. And then I can use that in any children that it cascades down to, which is really handy. It's a great property of CSS, and that carries over with variables as well. And there's also room for fallback cases. So if I don't have that cascading, for some reason I'm not getting the font color variable in that selector I'm using, I can use the var function, give it the font color variable name, and if it doesn't exist, we'll just use blue by default. So that's pretty cool. A little bit more sort of real-world example of this. So I have basically defined a couple global variables on my root document. So this is how you define global variables in CSS variables. So I have a text color that I'm setting to yellow, and I have a background color that I'm defining to be pink. But you'll notice in my footer, right, this black thing at the bottom here is this live demo, and the black thing is not pink, it's actually black. And that's because I've defined sort of a locally scoped background color variable to be black. So that's sort of the local scoping of CSS variables. And then I'm using the text color, which is inherited from that global variable, that text color yellow up here at the top. I can use that because, again, these rules cascade down into children. Very similarly, I've redefined a new local variable text color. Even though it's the same as this one that I've defined globally, it's locally scoped down here. And so that's why this white span is colored white instead of, what, yellow. So that's pretty awesome. CSS proper variables now. You can experiment with this in Chrome again with the experimental features flag. This is a really awesome, great, perfect time to highlight chromestatus.com. A lot of stuff I'm going to show you today is brand spanking new. And of course, Chrome is one of the first browsers to see a lot of this awesome coolness. But we're actually trying to track across different browser vendors sort of the lay of the land, where features are in flight. And you can visit chromestatus.com. It's not only Chrome features, but sort of what other browser vendors are thinking, where specs are. So you can get a good idea for when features are available. Aha. What about CSS feature detection in CSS? How cool will that be? It's right here. So we have now a new @supports rule that finally landed. And we can actually do feature detection in CSS to detect features that are CSS features. So this is really great because we've relied on JavaScript libraries to do this for us. But if I wanted to, I can test if the browser, right, that the user is using, if it supports Flexbox. So basically this new @supports rule, and then I give it the query, sort of like similar to a media query, right? But it's the property that I want to test for. So in this case, if the browser supports Flexbox, all the rules in this block, right, will then apply. So in that case, I know it's true. The browser supports Flexbox. I can set and use, I can make the body a Flexbox container. So if the browser doesn't support this new rule, it's no big, nowhere. It's just going to ignore all those styles in there. So that's totally cool. There's no harm done there. But I can do things like nodding or anding or oring. So a more complex example, although not entirely more complex, is at the bottom here. I can test for the negation or the complement, right? So if the browser doesn't support Flexbox with this not, then I can apply, maybe I can use floats, or I can use CSS columns, or I can use CSS grid if it's available. So really, really handy. You know, at the presentational level, we can now test CSS features using @supports. But similar to media queries, right, there's also a JavaScript API for that. We do have a JavaScript API for testing CSS features as well. And that's a new property on window, it's CSS. And then there's a supports method that you can use. And so this is kind of cool because you can do things like dynamic testing. And so it's really important that for this to return true, the browser has to, A, support the feature, right, support the CSS property. So most browsers now support width, so we're cool there. But the browser also has to actually successfully parse out, and this has to be a value that can be set to this property. So what I mean by that is, yes, width is supported in most browsers, but CSS calc, A may not be. But when I set it to some garbage, I use calc in like ABC or something, that's not a parsed out value. So the browser is actually going to return false for that particular call if I'm trying to set it to some garbage. And there's actually an overloaded version of this as well. If you don't want to give it sort of the simple property value pair, you can put in your full-on, crazy string of features that you want to test and feature detect. So I can test, for example, if the browser supports width, setting it to this calc value, and the browser supports Flexbox. So that's how you would do anding, nodding, and oring, or test for a bunch of vendor prefixes. So I guess the takeaway here is that we can reduce possibly if once this is supported across all the browsers, we don't need a library to do this for us and do feature detection. We can feature detect now natively in CSS. So this is actually pretty good support as well. Firefox Nightly has this, Chrome and Opera have this @supports. So this is a really common thing that you see all over the web. And if you can't kind of tell what's going on here, try to play this again. If you can't tell what's going on here, it's this thing on the left, this nav bar, right? So as I scroll this page, this nav bar kind of scrolls with the page, and at a certain point, it stops and becomes sticky. It sticks to that position. And that's really great for navigation. And then when I come back past that threshold again, it starts to be position relative. And this is great. This is a really common thing to do. The internet is littered with this now. You have Google News, which was that example I just showed you. Yelp on their map results has this, their little menu, or their map follows you as you scroll the page. I think TechCrunch used to have this on their header. So super common, blogs do this, everybody's doing this. And the way you do it is really easy. It's with some JavaScript. So you define a position fixed class that you can apply in CSS. Excuse me. Give it position fix. I want to tell it to stick to 0 pixels from the top, and give it a width of 100%. So this banner is just going to sort of span the entire top of the presentation. And then what you do is you set up a JavaScript scroll handler. So you get that initial offset of that element you want to tell to stick at a certain location. And then you set up a scroll handler that basically detects, have I scrolled past that initial offset? If I have, apply that position sticky class, or that fixed class. And then when I come back down, this, of course, condition won't be true anymore, and then you just remove that class, and it becomes position static or whatever it was before. So that's super handy, but a really cool new way to do this is to use position sticky. And this is actually one of the only features I'm talking about today that doesn't have a spec. It landed in WebKit. It's super awesome, super handy, because without any JavaScript, we can have the exact same functionality. So I really hope this is implemented soon in all browsers. FYI, you can enable this as well in Chrome, using about flags. So I can set up a class, position sticky, or vendor prefix, WebKit sticky, and I can say 10 pixels from the top, that's where you're going to do your sticking. Totally cool, no JavaScript whatsoever. So if that doesn't make sense to you, let me show you a quick demo. So these blue bars running across my sort of blog posts here are just H tags, and they have position sticky on them. And so without any JavaScript, I can tell them to stick at 10 pixels from the top as I scroll this page. But what's really cool about this is that once their parent goes off the viewport, off the screen, they'll also go off the screen. So this is a really sort of common UI pattern that you're seeing now. I think Gmail does this, the native app at least. And this is really great, because the browser can optimize the snot out of this page. Let me bump this up a little so I can scroll way more. It can optimize the snot out of this page and put scrolling on the GPU, do all kinds of crazy cool compositing things like the previous talk talked about. And I don't have to touch JavaScript. I don't have to sort of negate that contract and say, I'm going to be doing a bunch of work in my scroll handlers. So that's really awesome. With run new position property, we have that functionality without the need for JavaScript. So again, position sticky enableable in Chrome. It's in WebKit nightly as well. You can play with that. What about doing crazy things like clipping DOM elements to crazy shapes, or like making interesting UIs? One thing we've had for a long time actually is the CSS Clip property. And so with Clip, I could say any DOM element, image, div, whatever you have, clip yourself to be a rectangle. And so that's what I'm doing here on this image, just clipping it to be some rectangle shape. But there's actually some really crazy limitations with this. First is that Clip only supports rectangles. So I can't do anything more complex. I can't do circles. I can't do polygons. So that's pretty limiting in and of itself. But the more, I think, restrictive thing is that the element has to be position absolute. So if we're talking about, again, responsive design, not everybody's doing position absolute layouts anymore. So super limiting in what you can do with CSS Clip. But what we have now is sort of an awesome new way, and this is Clip Path. So don't get confused. Clip Path is different than Clip. But this is great, because it removes the requirements of Clip, which are that the element doesn't have to be position absolute anymore. That's great. It can be position relative, whatever. So that's the first thing it gets rid of. And the second thing is that you can use any basic shape in the CSS or SVG exclusions specifications. So we're talking circles, we're talking polygons, we're talking whatever. Whatever you want, you can clip DOM to that clip path. And you can also specify a more complex shape. So it doesn't have to be just a basic shape. It can be, you can reference an ID of an SVG clip path, and I'll show you that in just a second. So again, vendor prefixed, clip path, I can clip any type of DOM to whatever I want now. In this case, I'm clipping just a section of div, right? Just some text to a circle, and I can have a little CSS transition as I do that. I can use crazy CSS animations and then do kind of a star effect. I don't know if you want this on your website, but it's still pretty cool that I can do that. And this here, the one all the way to the right, is just a list. It's a bulleted list, and it's got a little clip path polygon on top, so it's kind of a cool tape cutter effect. And so again, any type of DOM So I'm just going to go to HTML5 Rocks here real quick. And I have this bookmarklet here. But when I do this, it's going to add a CSS Clip path as a circle to the entire sort of container of the content. And so it's kind of this cool little, do-do-do-do James Bond effect. I have a little, I can change the width of this. But really neat. I think this is kind of cool. Like, we haven't been able to do this before, clipping DOM to different shapes. Again, not just regular shapes. We can do more complex things like reference a clip path in SVG. So I have a defined clip path in my SVG, right, inlined SVG to my document, and I can use clip path and reference a URL, or its ID by URL here at the top. And so what I get for this is, crazy modern art or something. I'm clipping an image with some interesting polygons. I don't know what's going on there. But again, it's not just images, right? It's any DOM. So this is text that's being clipped to that same reference clip path. Very cool stuff. So this one, Safari, Firefox, Chrome, and a couple mobile browsers as well. You can play with this today, clip path. All right, so that was a crash course in CSS. There's plenty we could cover, as I alluded to before. But I want to switch now to multimedia, because I think there's a lot of really, really awesome stuff coming to the browser space under multimedia. First is screen sharing. So I wrote an article about this on HTML5 Rocks. I might have talked about this a little bit last year using a WebSocket. You can do crazy kind of hacks and do screen sharing. But actually what we have now is the ability to do proper screen sharing with WebRTC. So this is an extension to the WebRTC specification. And so instead of getting user media, right, instead of getting camera or microphone data, I'm going to say my mandatory, the thing that I want access to, instead of giving a Boolean, I'm giving it an object describing I want a Chrome media source and set that to screen. So my source now is not my camera or mic, it's the desktop screen. So a quick demo of that is once I click this button, it's going to use get user media. It's going to create that call. I'm going to say, yes, I wrote this app. I trust it. And when I do, what I get is sort of an inception effect. So this is sharing, again, not just my tab, but it's my whole desktop. And so you can imagine, Google Hangouts, for instance, uses a plugin to this. You can easily do something with WebRTC now that this is available. Very, very cool, very inception-y. What I'm not showing you here is the more interesting thing, which is actually sharing that content out to other users. So I'm just rendering that locally to a video tag, getting that stream. Let me switch back to the code real quick. So I'm getting that using get user media. I'm getting the stream of data and pumping that in just to a video tag. But you could use our WebRTC data channel API then to transfer that as sort of a peer-to-peer. You could do things like remote desktop assistance, browse the web together, right? Friend and you sort of view different pages together. And that's all using nothing but open web technology, thanks to WebRTC and the project and some cool stuff they're doing in that project. So this one you can enable. It's still behind a flag, at least in Chrome. You can enable screen capture support in Get User Media, and that's in Chrome 26. So we've had web audio. There's been a couple talks last year on web audio API, but what we didn't have at the time was the ability to do anything really, really interesting with it. And what I mean by that is that you can combine sort of the WebRTC get user media, right? Get access to live microphone data, and you can combine that with web audio. You can do real-time sort of processing and analyzing of a microphone input into the laptop using nothing but open web tech. So this is one of my favorites because it really is great because it illustrates how a lot of, or at least two of these new APIs are talking together. So we have get user media, right? We get access to the microphone data, vendor prefixed. Once we get the stream, we'll create our web audio context, but we won't give it an MP3 file. We won't give it an audio file to play. We'll create media stream source. So we'll pass that microphone data right to the web audio API, and then we can use that API to do real-time processing, effects, filters. So that's really awesome. Let me just show you a quick demo of this. This is a demo I did a couple of years back, but now, good afternoon. So hopefully you can see as I talk, there's a canvas tag that's doing the real-time analysis of the voice. So get user media is giving me access to the microphone, and then we're pumping that in to the web audio API. Very, very cool. It allows you to do some very interesting things, not just visualize your voice, but you can do things like record. Can we have this other mic on? Record, so this is just a visualization of my voice as I talk into this second mic here. But using nothing but client-side technologies, I think it's Recorder.js, you can record your voice, get that data from the web audio API, and then get the spectrum data and download the WAV file of the thing I just recorded. So really, really cool. No servers involved whatsoever. It's all thanks to WebRTC Get User Media and the web audio API. So what's even cooler is actually, it's not just microphone, right? Get User Media is for any type of device. So I want to see if this works here, you guys. Bear with. It's going to be a test of my guitar skills. There we go. Let's do a cool effect like distortion. That's a great guitar distortion. So web audio API, so I don't have a pedal up here. This is just basically a microphone input to a web page. So I can play guitar into a web page, I can tune my guitar, I can apply distortion effects in real time. What else we can do with this API? You can get sort of a, let's try this one. So that's interesting. Web audio API. What a flange. Now we're rocking. So all I have up here is a little USB controller that I plugged a guitar into, plug that into my USB in my laptop, and using the web audio API and Get User Media, I can play guitar, I can even tune. Let's see if this one will work. Oh, I don't have it. Sorry. Took it off. But very, very cool. Really awesome examples of sort of new web tech working together to do some interesting things we could never do on the web before. So live input to web audio API is available in Chrome. Firefox actually just has a web audio API coming. I believe they enabled it by default in their nightly build. So I really, really hope this comes to other browsers very soon that implement the web audio API. I think it's super, super awesome, right? Real-time processing effects, using mic input. You can imagine sending that across the wire using WebRTC to do karaoke or something. Auto-tune in the browser. It's here. It's super, super cool. Somebody wanted it. So if you remember from the keynote, right, you saw Google now sort of being, living on the web. And so can we do that? With all this access to the microphone data and these extra devices, can we do that in websites now? And the answer is sure, we can do this. There's a new API, it's called the Web Speech API. And it allows you to do speech recognition and voice synthesis in the web browser. And so you can set up this speech recognition object. You can say, hey, I want my results to be continuous. I can continue to talk in the microphone. The user can talk, and you can process results for me. I can set up interim results if I want. So as sort of the user talks, new results are being thrown back at me, and they're being redefined. I get that information. And then you set up events for all this. So there's error events, there's result events. In this case, on a result, all I want to do is rip out the last result that was filled in my results array and then pull out the transcript. So this is how I get the speech to text from the server that this is talking to. So let me hook this mic back up. Testing, testing. Give me 1 second. Testing, testing. I did. Testing. Oh no. Oh no. Okay, I'll use good tried and true. Hopefully I can use just the max input. This will be good. Testing, testing. So I can talk into this application. It's just a web app. It's using the web speech API to do continuous dictation. And I can type an email with no hands. So this is great. It's continuous playback. You can see the results as they come in. Hopefully it's not going to say anything naughty. As they're being processed by the server, they're coming in, they're being redefined. Apparently I just said nutty professor in 1910. We're not in 1910 anymore. But this allows for more than just dictation, right? We can do some really interesting things with other server-side and APIs to talk to. I don't know how to speak in Spanish, but I hope someone here does.
No sé cómo hablar en español, pero espero que alguien aquí hace.
Italian sounds very beautiful.
Italiano suona molto bello.
English doesn't sound quite as good, does it?
English doesn't sound quite as good as it.
So that's voice dictation. That's translate using the Translate API. But what about Star Trek? Can we do Star Trek? Sure we can. Presentation.
Yes, how can I help you?
Go backward. Go forward. Open google.com. Close it. Google Paul Irish. Close it. Make me a sandwich.
Do it yourself.
Please make me a sandwich.
You're getting warmer.
Sudo make me a sandwich.
You said the magic word. How about PB&J?
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't understand.
We quiet her up. So that's using nothing but the web speech API and web technologies. No plugins whatsoever. Very, very cool stuff. Available in Chrome today. We talked about a lot, so I have about 4 minutes left. I can't cover the entire web platform, but we talked about feature detection in CSS, new units, responsive design, CSS variables after 15 years or something. They're finally like a thing you can start to play with. Position sticky for doing position fixed elements that are really easy without JavaScript. Live input from not only a microphone, but different types of devices to the web audio API. Screen sharing, web speech API. And there's plenty to look forward to. Things like CSS grid layout I'm really excited about, being able to define sort of a grid system for your page or your app. Web components, there's 2 sessions on this. Amazing stuff you can do. It's going to fundamentally, I think, change the way we develop applications. WebRTC on mobile, video conferencing on a phone using nothing but web tech. And there's some other cool things too. I think Blink has proposed some interesting ideas, such as lazy block layout. This is infinite scroll lists that are really easy. This is very hard to do in JavaScript. There's been a lot of smart people on this. They're proposing an API to do this. DOM attributes in JavaScript make everyone's app faster. So there's plenty to look forward to. I want to point out, if you want to follow sort of things in Chrome, we're trying to track this really aggressively now. There's these Blink intent to implement emails that are sent out to Blink dev, and you can follow sort of the lay of the land of where everything is in flight on all these new features if you want to stay sort of up to date or 6 months ahead of where things are implemented. So that's really great. turn to HTML5 Rocks. My team helps write articles for that, and we try to cover some of this new stuff so you can learn about it. I'm going to plug Chrome status again. It's not just Chrome. We're trying to do this for all browser vendors and sort of get the lay of the land so you can follow things. There's bugs, there's version numbers. It's really, really handy. So I really appreciate you guys' time. Thank you for everyone tuning in the live stream. This presentation is going to be up at moreawesomeweb.com. I might not have enough time for questions here, but feel free to hit me up at office hours or visit me on one of those social channels there. Thank you guys. Really appreciate it.